And welcome on back, everybody. Thursday Night Live here at AU Club, here at Auburn Undercover. I'm Nathan King, joined by Jason Caldwell. We are glad to be back in person this week after we got rained out this week. As I understand, some other folks were able to come back as well after the rain kept us away. Hopefully everybody stayed safe with that last week. But Jason, this is our first road edition of the show. You and I will be on the road tomorrow, headed to Athens for Auburn's first road game of the season, and we'll get plenty into that. We'll get plenty into the matchup with Georgia. We'll get plenty into some recruiting news. We've got Christian Clemente waiting off in the bullpen to join us here a little bit later for some recruiting news that hopefully you all know at this point, but him and Jason will break it down. But Jason, when we looked at this 5-game home stretch for Auburn to start the season, we certainly didn't expect them to be at this position heading into this road game against Georgia. I'm not sure we thought they'd be 5-0 heading to Georgia, but you thought it would be, a nice little boost at the start of the season. Instead, and we'll talk a little bit about that Oklahoma game, the turnovers continue to plague this team. That's probably the number one thing they're going to be focused on moving forward, and it was particularly a big killer against Oklahoma because you felt like, other than that interception, you felt like you played your best game of the season.
Yeah, I think it's probably the best game that an Auburn team's probably played in 3 years, to be quite honest. I thought they did some really good things, and you're right. And it was unfortunate because the turnover was the ultimate turnover, and that it led directly to 7 points because of the pick six. If you fall down right there and have to score and drive the football, it may not turn out that way, but things have a way of finding you when you get in these situations, your own luck a little bit. And so, but you're right. I thought for the most part that was a really good performance. Like I said, it didn't turn out to build a lead early on.
Yep.
But you're still up 11 in the fourth quarter, a chance to kind of salt the game away, and just didn't do it for, as Hugh Freeze said, coaching decisions, execution decisions. There was plenty of blame to go around at the end of the game, but for the most part, I thought it was as building performances go, you don't like to do those, and sooner or later you have to start winning some of these. But that was a team and a performance that I think you can learn from heading into to this road trip.
Yeah, winning is a skill, the ability to win at the end of a game. And we talked to Luke Deal this week, the sixth-year senior tight end, and he said, look, situational execution, I thought that was a good way to put it, is lacking for this team. And, like you said, it can come down to coaching. A lot of it can come down to execution in the game. I agree with you, Jason. There were a lot of points in this game against Oklahoma where you felt like you left some points on the board. They had an opportunity for a couple field goals there before the half. And Hugh Freeze admitted it this week. He said he had a lot of regrets from a play calling perspective. The 4th and 1, I think a couple different instances in this game, he kind of looks back and thinks maybe should have just given the ball to 2-7 on the goal line there, giving it a little closer, having an opportunity to score. And then at the end of the game, and Jason, I thought Peyton Thorne was very open about it this week a couple different times, including with us on Tuesday. He explained and went through that interception. And he defended the play, the read, thought it was the right read to make, thought it was the right play to call there in a 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5 situation. But hindsight is 20/20, and like you said, that became the ultimate killer to have that interception and that turnover in that spot of the game. But as I'm sure we'll get to, before that, Peyton Thorne was absolutely dynamite in this game, and I think clearly is their best quarterback moving forward.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's much question about that, and you're right. Can you eliminate those critical mistakes? And it's not just him; it's everybody on this team. Can you eliminate those critical mistakes? But yeah, that after going back and watch, because being on the field, I have such a small window to see what's going on. Going back and watching it after the game, and you see that, in all honesty, Oklahoma did a great job of baiting Peyton Thorne and the Auburn offense into a turnover because they did not show that. They kept it really well hidden and disguised and made a great play. And so that's the thing. You look at it and go, like, sometimes you just have to take the option out of that and go, look, we're going to run the football. And I think, again, can you learn from those things moving forward? Tennessee did it a couple of weeks ago against Oklahoma and said, look, we got enough points to win. We're going to run it and just grind it out and win the football game. I think if Auburn had done the same thing, we're sitting here with a much different feel heading into Athens. But for the most part, I thought there were some real positives offensively. Nathan, defensively, those young guys showed up and continued to play well, and really across the board. And Hugh Freeze said 24 of the 49 players that played against Oklahoma are freshmen or sophomores. And you look at it, that's a great thing to have those guys playing at a high level, but it's also a scary proposition when
Sure.
you now go on the road for the first time against a team that's won 26 straight home games.
Yeah, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I wonder if this isn't a really good time for this team to go on the road. Hugh Freeze talked about it this week. There is a level of pressure, I think, that comes with playing in front of your home crowd again and again and again. Instead of having that us against the world mentality that you get to take when you play on the road, there's some jeers, there's some groans when you don't do things the right way. And so, like you said, that element of things, how these young players respond to going on the road for the first time, that is going to be a big key. But yeah, Jason, we saw one player in particular get to shine in that game against Oklahoma, one true freshman in particular. For the other guys, it was sort of more of the same, but we are seeing them start to continue to develop. DeMarcus Riddick is a guy that you and Christian have known for some time, and you guys have scouted him for a long time, watched him play basketball. You know how good of an athlete he is. I thought it was so simple that it was smart, the game plan of just put a freak athlete linebacker freshman, essentially the all-time spy, like you do when you're playing in the backyard and don't let the quarterback run around. I think getting his feet wet, and he only played 20 snaps in this game, and he led Auburn in tackles. Getting his feet wet in this opportunity, I think, was one of several examples that we've seen of these true freshmen who look a lot different than some of the players Auburn has had the last few years, look a lot different than those young guys starting to find their role. And at the moment, there's maybe assignments, stuff like that is different, but there's not a ton of difference in terms of production from the 18, 19-year-olds Auburn's got and the rest of the roster right now.
Yeah, I think it was the right opportunity as well for DeMarcus Riddick, because Auburn had played kind of those running quarterbacks the last few weeks and had been looking for a way to figure out how to keep those guys in their pocket better. We saw last week DeMarcus Riddick and Jalen McLeod kind of both play in a spy role, so they kind of had a double spy on them going, hey, you're going to have to throw the ball to beat us. Not going to be the same thing this week with Carson Beck, and so it'll be a little bit different role, I think, but I do believe that DeMarcus Riddick has shown you that he can be a guy that you can play off the edge a little bit. Now, he's not the classic maybe hand in the dirt pass rusher, but I think you look at what he does, and now when you're facing an offense that wants to spread it out, throw it, I think you can send him after the quarterback some. His speed, his athleticism, change of direction are all things that can be really important. But when you look at it, I thought it was a huge step for him. And again, it'll be a much different challenge for the defense this week, and we'll talk more about that later in the show. But I think for DeMarcus Riddick, it was a confidence boost. Jay Crawford, that he continues to come on and play well. Caleb Harris is the guy right now that probably maybe the biggest surprise for folks who had never seen him before.
Sure.
Because he wasn't a five-star guy, but he's been playing since he was a freshman in the best program over in the state at Thompson. Smart kid, but has added to his athleticism because he's become bigger and faster in the last 12 to 18 months. And you combine that with a guy who knows football, and you're getting a guy that's making plays. And so that young group going to be extremely tested this week. But, man, you see the difference in athleticism in that group. That's where the future is for this Auburn defense and for this Auburn roster.
Yeah, and taking advantage of opportunities to, this Auburn secondary has moved around a little bit. You've had injuries. I think Jaron Thompson went out. He's on the injury report this week. I'd be surprised if he doesn't play at Georgia. But some shuffling here and there, guys moving at positions. Keontae Scott going to nickel instead of corner. And then Champ Anthony's season-ending injury against Arkansas. They don't turn to Antonio Kite at corner. They turn to Jay Crawford, a guy that we had heard all the way back in the spring. Hey, this guy's got it all together. He's just a true freshman. I was talking to some people at the game, Jason. Anytime you have a corner who's lining up across from a receiver and his hands are all basically down to his ankles while he's waiting for the play to start, it's usually some decent physical tools. But I mean, he played every single snap for Auburn on defense. Jay Crawford never came off the field. I understand he had a penalty, but they didn't technically throw his way a single time, which is really, really big. For a true freshman. On the other side, just to kind of touch on some of these young guys and how they're coming along, Cam Coleman, I thought you started to see a little bit more of an idea of, hey, this is what they want to do with him in the offense. And then Malcolm Simmons, I mean, we've known he's explosive, but we talked to him after the game, and he said, look, when I'm one-on-one, I feel like nobody can guard me. And I think Auburn is realizing, and this is what we've thought about this team from going back to the preseason when we thought they were going to be a little more consistent as a passing game. Putting the ball over the top, they have more weapons than they have in 5, 6, 7, 8 years in a long time at wide receiver, and 11 and 8 have proven themselves to certainly be part of that group.
They have. I mean, Malcolm is a guy that can really run. I think you see special plays from Malcolm. I think you see Cam within the framework of the offense. I think you'll see Malcolm start to get into more of the actual offense as they move along. And then Keontae Lambert-Smith has been fantastic. And so you add the steadiness of a guy on one side, the explosiveness of those two freshmen, and it's really the reason why the running game has been as good as it is, because people have said, look, we're going to keep putting guys in the box. And Auburn has been able to make plays in the passing game. Now, they've turned it over, but you look, and Auburn has 12 passing plays of 40 or more yards this year. That's 4 more than anybody else in the country through 5 games. It doesn't make sense to people, because you look and you go, they've struggled. They have not struggled moving the football. They struggled because they've turned the ball over. But I think you look at it, for this offense, the numbers game is always going to be important. How you handle that, can you make the right decisions, and can you execute it? But it's always going to be, how many guys are in the box? If there's 7 guys in the box and you got the right play, you're going to run. If there's 8 guys up there, the numbers tell you that you better find a guy to throw it to and take a one-on-one situation. And so those things have allowed this offense to be pretty dynamic so far. We talked about it last week. If you don't turn the ball over, this is an Auburn team that can play with anybody. For 49 minutes, they were as good as we have seen in quite a while. One turnover, though, shows you how impactful it is for a team that doesn't have a whole lot of room for error.
Yeah, and I mean, it's football is about finishing drives. Football is about finishing games. And again, I go back to our conversation with Luke Deal. That's what he talked about. It doesn't necessarily matter how many yards you have. Auburn racked up 482 yards in this game against Oklahoma, 144 yards on the ground. This was an Oklahoma defense that had been one of the best in the country, hadn't allowed anybody to do that. Hugh Freeze said it this week. He said this is one of the best game plans on offense and defense he has ever been a part of as a coach. It just goes back to, and I think, Jason, that's why 2 and 3 is always going to be frustrating for anybody. I think it's why Hugh Freeze felt the need this week to sort of, I don't know if defend the program is the right word, but sort of present a reminder of what this process is right now, because he is frustrated. He's as frustrated as anybody else, but I think he is seeing clear signs of progress. This defense is probably around the same level as they were last year. This passing game is certainly more explosive than they were last year. They've got better players than last year. It is just these little situational mistakes that have come back to bite them. I think it's a little bit of bad luck, but at the same time, Jason, it is this team needing to figure out how to play better mistake-free football, needing to figure out how to execute when the pressure's on, because when the fourth quarter came, you had an 11-point lead. That's starting to crumble under pressure a little bit.
Yeah, no, finishing a game is as important as building a lead, and learning how to play 4-minute football at the end of games and salting away a victory that's an important part of things, and that's the next step for this team. Can you get to yourself in that situation again, and then can you execute and finish it off? And so, yeah, I mean, there are, again, like you said, lots of positives. You look at it, and this is a team that there's some older guys that are playing well, but if you look at the talent on this team, much of it is in the freshman and sophomore classes. And so along with that comes mistakes here or there. And, I mean, yeah, the quarterback has made some mistakes, some of those on the wide receivers this year as well. We've had, you've had a guy that whiffed on a block up front, and there's still some of those things. There's fewer of them than we've seen because you're executing other plays. The last few years we saw those, and it was almost every play where you go, something happened every play to where they could not execute the offense at all. And now you've eliminated much of those, but now you're creating those costly mistakes because they're being aggressive, and you'll have to be aggressive. That's the thing about it. Saturday, you go to Georgia, and you're not going to win that game playing Michigan football and going, let's just run it 58 times up the middle. You're not going to be able to do that. You've got to be able to throw it, run your offense, execute it, but you have to do it at a high level, and you have to do it without turning the ball over.
Well, and on that subject, Jason, I mean, you and I weren't surprised that they decided to go with Peyton Thorne moving forward. It made sense to go with him against Oklahoma, and then there were really no questions for Hugh Freeze on Monday at the quarterback spot. And there really shouldn't have been when you look at the kind of game. Even with that interception, it was the second best QBR of Peyton Thorne's Auburn career. I think the number one for him was the game against Mississippi State last year. I think both of us would agree this was a bigger opponent, a bigger stage.
Yes.
I think in a lot of ways, this is the best we've seen him play in an Auburn jersey. So it makes sense to go with him moving forward. I hear people who say, well, if Auburn's going to go 5-7 this year, why not do it with a young quarterback? I hear that side of things, but at the end of the day, two things. Number one, it's not the NFL. You're not tanking. And number two, Hugh Freeze's main job, he is paid to win football games. And he believes, and I think most people should believe if you look at it, Peyton Thorne is the best quarterback right now to give them an opportunity to win football games. Because like you said, if they go and replicate some of that at Georgia, again, not saying they'll win, they will have an opportunity to give that defense some struggles because we have seen Peyton Thorne come through and have that kind of execution with this passing game.
And this is a group of skill position players now for Auburn. This is the first time in a long time where you go, hey, you can match up with just about anybody from a skill position standpoint. That has not been the case for a long, long time. So you have that ability for Auburn, and now you look at it and go, what do you need to do now to take the next step? And consistency is that step. But getting back to that original point. In this day and age, if you punt on a season, you might not have anybody left at the end of the year.
Right.
Because people are like, well, first of all, your older guys are going, hey, you're giving up on us. And then the young guys are going, well, I thought you taught us to fight to the end, and now you're quitting. And playing a young quarterback wouldn't mean you're quitting. But if you feel like Peyton Thorne, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of the folks in that locker room realize that he gives them the best chance to win. If you don't do that, now if you go out and turn it over 4 more times, then that might be it.
Sure.
But I think right now you have to do what you can do to try to win every football game. Every game's important, especially when you're talking about trying to continue to rebuild a program that was in disarray, and that's being counted.
And that doesn't mean Hank Brown's opportunities are gone
Nope.
at all. I mean, we saw him with some first team work at practice on Tuesday. Like, he is having opportunities in practice to run this offense. And like you said, if they feel like things aren't going well with Peyton Thorne, I just think you look at this stretch right now, 3 straight road games. We said it last week why it made sense to go with Thorne. He's sort of unkillable at this point. Like, he's an older veteran guy. He has seen a lot of stuff in college football. He had 4 interceptions in his last start, comes back and has a great game. Now he throws a back-breaking, probably one of the worst mistakes he's made, pick 6. I wouldn't expect him to blink going to Georgia. He's seen enough of it, so it makes sense to go with him. Jason, I do want to tap in Christian here to come and talk about some huge recruiting news. Recruiting news that, I mean, it's only been a couple of times in my time around the team that there has been so much anticipation around a single player. And this one got drawn out over the course of a few months. Finally, Auburn gets to a huge decision, a huge commitment from a guy who becomes, maybe not the crown jewel, but the number 1 player at the most important position on the field, and a guy that Hugh Freeze really, really likes and thinks can be the future of the program.
Yeah, you think about the addition of Deuce Knight. I mean, as Christian kind of slides in here, it's been probably, I would say, the time we put stories in to get prepared for this, Christian, it's been a month. It's probably been 5 weeks.
I mean, we had stuff ready before Big Cat Weekend.
Yeah,
when we thought there was a chance he would show up.
Yeah, so it's been a long, drawn out process, but man, the payoff for it, Christian. I mean, when you start talking about, and you did it, you ran down kind of the list of quarterbacks that Auburn has gotten committed and all these over the years. You start running down the list, and I think back to Jason Campbell and how impactful that one was, another Mississippi guy, and it wound up being a guy that was very impactful in the future of the program. And then you think about Cam Newton, and you think about other ones. You think about Deuce Knight, and you think about a guy that has that type of potential because of the athleticism. And Christian, this is a guy that I know the Elite 11 guys, we talked to coaches there, we talked to people that saw him, that they were really impressed by the things he did on and off the field.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've known Deuce for a little while now. Went back to when he was initially offered there in January of last year. Great kid. Always was a guy that I was rooting for, when he was committed to Notre Dame, going through their recruiting process, whatever. You hope the best for him, and it turns out, full circle, he's back at Auburn now. You mentioned it, some of the progression that he has made on the field. That has been the biggest thing. Similar player, kind of, to Walker White, in a sense where it's a super high ceiling guy, floor is maybe a little bit lower as well. You need to hit on one of those guys, but everyone that was there at Elite 11 there in Los Angeles said that he had taken a huge step forward in terms of his passing, He's only played in 2.5 games so far this fall, left the third game with kind of a quad injury. But right now he's completing 65% of his passes, 7 touchdowns, no interceptions. So it is a guy, I mean, you mentioned it, 4.53 in the 40, 41.9-inch vertical. I mean, he tests off the charts. And if his throwing consistency can get just a little bit better over time, Auburn's set with one of him or Walker White.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, and I hated to do it, but, you know, I always do player comparisons when you start talking about guys that committed, and I threw the comparison of Vince Young out for Deuce Knight, and I hated to do it because Vince Young is probably one of the top 10 college football quarterbacks of all time. He may be top 5, to be quite honest. It wasn't necessarily a guy that translated well to the NFL, but you watched Vince Young play and you saw long, athletic, a guy that puts so much pressure on the defense, stronger than people think. And I think about Deuce Knight, thinking about him 2 years from now, because he's probably 6'5", 205 or so probably right now.
Right now, that's what they've got him listed at.
Yeah, I would guess he's a guy that will have no problem being 6'5", 220 playing here in a couple of years, and a guy that runs a 4.5 and has all those physical traits. He's got a good arm strength. It has a little bit of Vince Young from the left side feel to it too, because it's a little bit of a 3-quarter motion. But man, you think about the potential of this offense, the RPO system, having a guy like that can run it, can do different things, and it's going to be big. But Christian, what it does is something that we've been talking about for years. It creates competition. You can't think, I've already got my quarterback here, we'll just skip a year and get to the next year. Go sign the best guy you can sign every year, and may the best man win. And it feels like that's what's happening for the first time at Auburn in a long time.
Yeah, you have to do that. That is what every single top team does. You recruit over your guys. Look at what Ohio State did last year. They got Aaron Noland signed in the class, and then another guy in his class, Julian Sayin, was transferring out of Alabama, and they brought him in because they thought he might be better than Aaron Noland. They literally recruited over a guy in the same recruiting class. Now, that was a little interesting, and that's a different scenario a little bit, but the point is you are always recruiting to try and get better at every single position. There were a lot of guys out there, a lot of people on the message board as things kind of wavered with Deuce Knight and they took longer than expected. Like, oh, well, we've got Walker White. The coaches believe in Walker White. Why not just roll with him and we're good, we'll cut our ties and get a portal guy. Auburn's going to get a portal guy, but you got to get a high school guy as well. If you want to be a top 10, top 5 college football program, you need to recruit a high school quarterback and as good of a one as you can find every single year. I mean, you mentioned it, looking back at previous years, from what I could find from 1999 to now, this is the first time that Auburn has signed will sign two top 5 quarterbacks in back-to-back classes. Deuce Knight right now ranked as the number 5 quarterback, so he could finish outside of that range, or he could move up for that matter. But point being, you've got 2 top 5 guys right now stacked in 2 recruiting classes.
Yeah, here's why it's important. Think about Georgia, think about Alabama, and think about the number of quarterbacks who weren't the guy that were signed. I mean, Alabama and Georgia have both signed a bunch of 4- and 5-star quarterbacks over the years that never played. But you find one that does. The other guys, maybe they weren't good enough. But that's why you can't count on one guy, no matter what position it is. We've seen it over the years when people say, well, the 5-star guys at Auburn didn't pan out because of this. Well, when you only have one, your chances are that you're not going to hit on them. When you have 12 of those guys and you hit on 6, yeah, you're batting 50%, but people only remember the 6 you hit on. They don't remember the 6 you missed on. As I've said a long time, Georgia and Alabama missed on just as many guys as Auburn has over the years. But when you have a lot more of those really good ones, it doesn't show up. And so I think it's a huge addition. And now, you mentioned the portal. Auburn will sign a portal quarterback. Here's the other thing. This does not mean that, I've heard people say, well, whether your quarterback's not on campus, he could be. Hank Brown could be Auburn's quarterback next year. You don't ever know. Guys are allowed to improve.
White, Deuce Knight, it'll be open.
Yeah, Holden Gardner. Yeah. People are allowed to get better, and you never know what it looks like in the spring. So that's the one thing. What you want to do is create competition. The more of those guys you got, the more competition it breeds, the better it makes everybody, and I think that's the key for this. Not only quarterback, but when you look across the board right now, everywhere, it's going, hey, how many of the best players can we bring in to create that kind of competition at every position across the board?
Yeah, and I wrote about that earlier today, talking about the domino effect that you could get from getting Deuce Knight. Now, the concept of package deals and recruiting very rarely ever pan out. The only one I can remember in recent history is James Smith and Quay Russaw, who ended up going to Alabama. But a lot of the time it's, I like this guy, we want to play together. Doesn't always pan out. It just so happens that Deuce and Alvin Henderson are guys that talked about it and now we're going to play together. But in terms of other guys that this helps Auburn with, Jason, still recruiting Andrew Babalola really heavily. We know that Deuce Knight has been talking to Babalola behind the scenes for 5-6 weeks now. Same goes for a guy like Neem Offord, the 5-star cornerback committed to Ohio State there out of Parker. Caleb Cunningham, the Alabama 5-star wide receiver commit. He visited for the Arkansas game. He said basically Auburn's main chance to get him would be if they got Deuce Knight. Now that's going to be an uphill battle. You've got a ways to go there, but it still gives you a fighting chance now. And especially, the question that pops up so much now with Auburn's 2-3 start to the season is, well, what's going to happen to the class? Are guys going to start to leave? Now you have a true leader in the class in a quarterback who flipped from Notre Dame after Auburn was 2-3. It's not like he just joined the class.
Correct.
Or joined the class a couple months ago. He just joined the class. He clearly believes in what Hugh Freeze is building. So now you've got that leader. Look, you'll lose a guy or two. Every team.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you go undefeated and win the national title. You will lose a guy or two. That will happen. That's not me speaking on intel. That's me saying, playing the numbers, you will lose a guy or two. But you feel like you're pretty good, at least as of right now, with where the class stands and sticking together.
Yeah, and I think you start talking about numbers and how this thing goes. There's a roster addition that's coming. We don't know how many that's going to mean in terms of full scholarships. We've heard, hey, it may be 105. It's going to be a 105 roster. Maybe they have 105 full scholarships. If they do, you'll see a bigger, deeper class for Auburn coming this year. They might add a couple more guys at positions that aren't even on the board right now. And so those are things to watch. But, yes, you create competition. When you start talking about positions and players and those things, the most important thing for folks to remember it, and they haven't had to remember this in a long time at Auburn, is that you're recruiting guys now that believe they're the guy that comes in as the difference maker. You're not recruiting guys to go, I hope this guy's going to be good enough. You're recruiting guys and telling them, look, you're good. You're going to make us better. They've already seen that from the freshman class this year. And now you're adding guys that say, look, I'm the guy that makes the difference. If I'm on the field, we win that game. That's why you feel like, hey, you're closer. The guys see it. Do you have to go out and win a few of these down the stretch? Absolutely. You don't need to crawl in here at 5 and 7. It might cost you a few more. But if guys look up and go, hey, they're competitive, they are there, they're just missing a couple of spots, which is what it looks like right now, then I think you're a group that could add even more a few of these big time guys.
One more guy I want to touch on real quick before we tag Nathan back in to close out the show, Usman Kroma. We're talking about guys that can make an impact. Auburn needs running backs. They've already got Alvin Henderson committed, obviously, but Usman Kroma will announce his decision here on Saturday. He's not going to visit anywhere. He's doing a little ceremony back at home, but it just so happens he's really deciding between Auburn and Georgia. Florida State have been in the mix. Tennessee has been in the mix, but not really involved down the stretch. From talking to a bunch of different kind of angles and sources here, there's still confidence at Auburn, but there's confidence in Georgia too. And when it comes down to an in-state guy, I'm always going to favor the in-state school. So favor Georgia, at least in my opinion, going down the stretch here. But it's far from over. We're less than 48 hours away. It's far from over because Auburn is still fighting, and Kroma has not made a final decision by any means.
Yeah, and this could be a number situation where you look at it and, Georgia has a lot deeper group. There's a lot more opportunity for him at Auburn, and they don't really have anybody that's quite like Usman Kroma. He's a bigger back, more physical, and so I think that could play into Auburn's favor. I still would lean towards Georgia a little bit, but yeah, that's an Auburn-Georgia battle that'll happen off the field. And Nathan, when you get on the field, we've seen it. This is an Auburn defense that has held its own, but they've held their own against teams that really didn't challenge them down the field vertically. That's going to change Saturday, and this is the first time they will have seen a team like that. This young secondary, talented group, but now they're going to go and see something they haven't seen much of this year. Boy, it's going to be imperative for Jalen McLeod and Keldrick Falk, and for those interior guys to be able to get some pressure and make Carson Beck uncomfortable, because if he's standing there patting the football Saturday, then you're going to be in for a long day against this group.
Well, especially, Jason, because this is a Georgia team that I don't know how many people have kept up with them through the first few games, but this is not like the Georgia offenses that you've probably been used to over the past few years. Looking at it right now, they're 126th in the country in rushing attempts. Mike Bobo, obviously Auburn fans know him very well. He's got a veteran quarterback over there. He's got Carson Beck. Beck has a bunch of good receivers this year. They always do, but they hit the transfer portal a little bit harder than usual to get guys in there. We saw them making plays there in that Alabama game. I mean, this is an offense that hasn't been afraid to go to the air with a guy who could potentially end up as the number one pick in the NFL draft. And so, yeah, Jason, I'm interested. You've scouted Georgia today on our website with a great piece, but I'm interested to see, to hear what your perspective is of this offense. Maybe some areas that Auburn could have. Could find some advantages, could try to attack. Of course, anytime you're facing a team like Georgia and you're Auburn, you're in the process of rebuilding, they are probably going to have the matchup advantage at most, if not every spot on the field. That's just kind of how it goes against a budding dynasty like that. But like Jason said, this is going to be a game where third and longs you try to get off the field, and you're trying to limit that running game, because you definitely don't want a team that hasn't run the ball at a super highly successful rate. You don't want them to suddenly find their groove in a game like this.
It seems strange that Georgia has 6 rushing touchdowns in 4 games. That's not what you would think about when you think about them, but they've had some issues on the offensive line. They'll be without Tate Ratledge, who's maybe their most impressive run blocking interior guy. They'll be without him. They may be without their starting center as well. He was injured against Alabama. If he's out, it potentially could be Drew Bobo, who went to school at Auburn High School just a couple of years ago. So they've had some injury issues up front. Now, they've recruited really well, but still, when you're taking guys out of the lineup, it's going to have an impact. So I think that's the thing you look at it. That's why they've thrown it more. You're right. They're averaging 4.8 yards a carry, which isn't terrible, but you start looking at it and you go, that's 58 in the country. They've only carried the ball 107 times, like you said. So they're averaging about 26, 27 carries a game, which does not seem possible for Georgia football. Mike Bobo is an old school run, play action kind of guy. They've spread it out a little bit more, and it feels like they've kind of lost a little bit of identity because of that. Now that feels like they're almost spreading it out and then running a little bit. That plays in Auburn's favor. But again, you got to be able to get to the quarterback without having to send 7 or 8 guys. If you do that, then you got some things you got to do. So this could be the game where you see maybe Keldrick Falk inside. We know he's going to play some tackle at some point. This may be a game where he slides inside and you try to get a little bit more speed, pass rush ability on the field to go up against Georgia.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I mean, Keldrick Falk right now is one of the best pass rushers in the country, regardless of where he's been playing. He's number 1 in the Power 4 in quarterback pressures right now, with 21 of them on the season in only 5 games. Jalen McLeod already has 7.5 tackles for loss. I mean, this has been a frustrating start to the season for Auburn, but there have been areas you can point to on defense where there have been some individual performances for them and guys who have come through that are playing really, really well. I like the way Philip Bleedy's being used on the defensive line right now. And then we mentioned the young guys earlier. We kind of touched on the offensive ones, but Malik Blockton, the true freshman, Marcus Harris's younger brother, could be their best interior defensive lineman right now with the way he's playing. He's certainly been on the field really consistently. You mentioned the injuries. Yeah, it's Jared Wilson for Georgia, the starting center. We'll see what he's able to do in this game. Smail Munden is not going to play. Jason, that's a pretty big one. One of their better players. And I mentioned the transfer wide receivers, London Humphreys. The Vanderbilt transfer also is out in this game.
Yeah, no, the Smail Munden one could be a big deal because of what he does. He's a speed linebacker, guy that Auburn recruited a few years back out of Georgia. This is an Auburn offense that we said, look, they can go attack you and they can do some things. And this is a Georgia defense that while they have given up some plays, they've been pretty consistent. I mean, they don't give up a ton of explosive plays, but Alabama had a few last week. And you look at who Georgia's played, and you go, they haven't really faced. I mean, the Clemson offense early on was dreadful. Then it was Tennessee Tech, Kentucky ran the ball and did not. Then it was Alabama, and Alabama scored 41. And so, is Auburn prepared to play at Alabama's level the way they did in Tuscaloosa? I don't know about that. But I do feel like this is a much different game than we've seen Auburn going to Athens for the last 15 years. I mean, Auburn has not scored more than 10 points in Athens the last 6 trips. I think 6 trips they've scored 47 total points. This feels like it's a much better opportunity for Auburn's offense to go make plays.
Yeah, it's been some time since they've scored more than one touchdown on the road now. I mean, you've been around the team for a long time. Me personally, in my time covering the team, I haven't seen them play good offense in Athens, just period. Just
other than the first possession of the game, usually, and that's been it.
Yep. My freshman year, 2016, was I don't believe they got a first down in the second half of that game. That was the Shaun White injury game, and then ever since then, it's been a cursed place for them, Jason. And I thought back to some of the storylines you and I talked about in the preseason. One of them was, hey, you're going to be a heavy favorite at Alabama, heavy underdog at Alabama. You're going to be a heavy underdog at Georgia. Go out there and start to show that you've got some talent to compete with them. The line on this game is 24. Again, you want to win, and they had a great game plan against Oklahoma last week. But Hugh Freeze said it on the teleconference. He was very transparent. He said, you probably have to play a completely mistake-free game to even have a chance to go upset Georgia. That's just the product of playing a team that hasn't lost at home since 2019, just doesn't lose in the regular season very often under Kirby Smart unless they're playing like a title contender like Alabama. And so it is going to take a lot. I think Auburn would be encouraged, and you're not at the point where you want to – moral victories don't do anything for you. And Peyton Thorne said it last week. He said he's tired of silver linings. But you would feel a little bit encouraged about the direction of things right now if you go and compete in this game for the majority of the time, just because, again, in my time around the team, in the past several years, they just Tuscaloosa and Athens, they usually it just doesn't even feel like a contest in those games. You've got to go in and give yourself an opportunity to at least be in the game for a handful of quarters.
Yeah, it's been almost 20 years, 2005 since Auburn won in Athens. Now they skipped one of those years with a double up, but that's a long time. A lot of the reason why, especially the last 8 years or so, has been that Georgia's had better players.
Yep. Now,
Auburn has had, and they've been good on defense, and that's really impacted Auburn. This is an Auburn offense that has more weapons to go and be able to challenge Georgia. I agree. The thing for me this week is to go give yourself a chance. Go give yourself a chance into the third quarter on the road to go out there and see if you can win a game. To me, give yourself one of those opportunities, and instead of, hey, it's 23-7 and it feels like it's 100-7,
right,
which is the way most of those games have been for the last decade. Go give yourself an opportunity, give yourself a chance to make some plays, protect the football. You do that, this is an Auburn team that is good enough to go compete. And I said it, they can compete with anybody, and that includes Georgia on the road. We've seen Georgia this year, and obviously, last week against Alabama, get down big early. Kentucky, they struggle early. Clemson, they struggle early. If you look at this one, and that's the thing, Auburn, make them have that pressure again by making them struggle early. Don't give up big play early, easy touchdowns. If you do that, then the pressure reverts to Georgia because they just lost a game. They're thinking we can't afford to lose another one because they still got road trips to Texas and Ole Miss to come. They've still got some difficult games. This is a massive game for them, and it's just human nature. It's human nature that Georgia has a bunch of players over there who go, we're good. We'll just play okay this week and we're fine. Because Auburn's 2-3, and you can show guys film and go, man, they're better than their record. But in the end, they haven't lost to Auburn in a long time. None of these guys on this roster have lost to Auburn. And then you start talking about what's ahead. This is a unique opportunity for an Auburn team that has the firepower to go over there and compete.
Well, you mentioned what's ahead as well, Jason. I think it's maybe important for Auburn to continue to take some encouragement into a bye week. You've got 2 bye weeks this season. They're obviously in the midst of they will begin here a 3-game road trip. They don't come home until November with a bit of an uneven SEC schedule for them. Yeah, I think if you go out here and you give yourself an opportunity, again, the silver linings aspect of things is obviously not where you want to be as a program, but we're sitting here talking about what they did well against Oklahoma and wondering if they can translate those things onto the road. A couple things that Peyton Thorne talked about, Jason, that I want to just kind of touch on real quickly as it related to taking some offensive improvements on the road. I'm sure you noticed this from field level. I wonder if they're going to huddle a lot more in this game. That's something he talked about. You didn't really see that stereotypical Hugh Freeze hurry-up system. again, because they knew it was going to be so much about field position against Oklahoma. This is another great defense in Georgia. I wonder if that will be part of their game plan again. And then we asked Peyton Thorne about it. He said, we'll see. We'll see. Doesn't want to give it away early in the week. But he said, number one, Thorne said he liked getting kind of the vibe of the team, getting guys right up against him with the helmet and kind of understanding, okay, here's where you're at, here's what you're thinking. But at the same time, the helmet communication, Hugh Freeze said, went really well in this past game, identifying checks at the line of scrimmage. I think that's going to be one of the biggest aspects in this game because we know Georgia, we know the kind of players they have on their front seven. They are going to really try to confuse you at the line of scrimmage. And how many times, Jason, have we seen, I've seen it with Robbie Ashford and Bo Nix, like they go to Georgia and it just feels like the offensive line is like a non-factor. It's like they're almost not even there sometimes. Correct. You cannot have that happen in this game if you're Peyton Thorne. Got to call out the correct stuff at the line of scrimmage to give yourself an opportunity to find some of those explosive plays you found in the last game.
Yeah, we saw huddles. We saw Auburn under center at times.
Right.
I think that's a way to get around some of this. And you play fast at times, but I think you'll see some different looks out of Auburn. And hey, just go play loose. I know it's easier said than done, but you have the pressure because you're 2-3. But Georgia has a lot too. I mentioned their schedule, and you got Auburn this week, then Mississippi State, but then you're at Texas. You still have at Ole Miss, and then you still have Tennessee at home too. So you got 3 games where you go, man, those are games you absolutely can lose. So I think this is an opportunity, and I think it's an opportunity that can go compete. And I haven't felt like that in a long time going to Athens, Georgia. Will it play out that way? We'll see. And we'll be over there to bring all the coverage and see what happens.
Yeah, and it's an interesting, we're in an interesting position here because we're sitting here talking about this team having an opportunity, particularly I think on the offensive end of things, because I was looking back the last time they were in Athens, it was 14-0 at halftime. I remember they played really well against Stetson Bennett there in the first half. They just didn't have any juice on offense.
Yeah, and went for it on their own end or a fake punt or something.
Yeah, fake punt.
And just destroyed them. And so, you can't have those types of game-changing plays. But, you're there even 2 years ago. Just go, like I said, avoid the early mistakes to give them some momentum. And I think you're there, you have a chance to compete, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot on the offensive side. The 2018 game with Jarrett Stidham. I remember the 2020 game. I think Georgia took like a 24-0 lead, something like that in the second quarter, and then they didn't really do much the rest of the game, but Auburn just couldn't get anything going. I think they scored 27 in the game, but Auburn just couldn't get anything going on offense.
They had a 2-minute drill there that they scored a few points there, and that was it. And so, I think this team, if you can build on what you did last week, this is an Auburn team, like I said, they can go compete in Athens and show that they're closer to what they need to be to compete against top teams in this conference. You got to be able to do that on the road. The first opportunity for them on the road this weekend.
Some interesting games around the country, Jason. I don't think we'll dive too deep into it, but the only ranked versus ranked game is one that'll be really interesting. Number 9, Missouri goes on the road to number 25, Texas A&M. Those are both teams that Auburn will play this season. I think Missouri is looking to get some juice going. They're still undefeated, but kind of show it against a good opponent on the road. They're coming off of a bye week. Ole Miss has to go on the road to South Carolina, and South Carolina has proven in the SEC so far this year that they're a force to be reckoned with, and I think that they're a little bit better than people thought they would be. Obviously, they gave LSU lots of trouble. Obviously, they went on the road and curb stomped Kentucky in that game. But Jason, just to close this out, for all the folks online, we're here at AU Club. We're obviously glad to be back after we got rained out last week, as we do every week. Thanking them for sponsoring the show here and being our partners. Talk to the folks a little bit about AU Club and what can be gained here and what you can do from coming over here and doing some golfing.
Absolutely, amenities, restaurant, pool, everything you need. A fitness center right outside our door here, and so lots of things going on here at AU Club. As you see, dinner tonight. There's a class reunion going on under the pavilion outside as well. So
we're going to go crash here in a minute.
There are lots of things going on, and something that people might have missed it this week. Going to be a member of AU Club, and you can get to play at a place where there'll be for the third time in 4 years there'll be an NCAA regional here. Just awarded an NCAA regional this week. One, of course, had to back out. Auburn jumps in, and so the men will be hosting a regional in the spring here at AU Club with a chance to go and repeat as national champs. And so great deal. Course is in fantastic shape, so come check it out. we appreciate them for having us as usual, and we'll do it again next week.
For sure. Looking forward to it moving forward. We hope everybody enjoyed Thursday Night Live. I am Nathan King with Jason Caldwell. We're with Auburn Undercover. Everybody listening online, I hope you enjoyed it in the dining room here at AU Club. Hope you enjoyed the show tonight as well, and we will talk to you guys for our first bye week episode next Thursday. So we'll see you guys soon, and thanks for joining us.